He is a sorry pilot who lets the waves wring his rudder from his grasp, who leaves the sails to fly loose and abandons the ship to the storm. But he who boldly grasps the helm and clings to it until the sea closes over him deserves praise, even though he be shipwrecked. Welcome to Orion Philosophy, where we explore, discuss, and dissect areas of practical philosophy for use in everyday life. The whole universe sat there, open to the man who could make the right decisions. Laid out in front of each of us is our future, and the future we meet is determined by the decisions and actions we make in the present. If we make good decisions, we increase our chances of meeting with a favorable future. If we make poor decisions, we increase the chance of the opposite being true. Stretched over the course of our lifetime, the ability to make good decisions can be the difference between living a life of abundance and general happiness versus living the hell we're trying to avoid. Discipline is the ability to make good decisions and act on them even when we don't have the motivation to do so, and especially when desire, fear, laziness, and the words of other people tempt us into inaction or counterproductive action. It's essentially the skill of overcoming desire, and I call it a skill because it can be developed, and we'll be discussing exactly how. Do we make a salad or do we order pizza? Do we stay up scrolling through YouTube Shorts and TikTok, or do we meditate and get a good 8 hours of sleep? Do we watch porn or do we go for a run? Do we click next for another episode of Stranger Things, or do we spend that hour working on our business? The impact of each of these decisions in isolation is probably negligible in the grand scheme of your life. But when we're making hundreds of decisions each day, over the course of decades, they not only build unconscious habits, but they alter the entire course of a life. In his journal Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. What do I have to complain of, if I'm going to do what I was born for? The things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm?" Discipline seems to be something we all want, but as we get older and develop habits and patterns of living, it seems to get harder and harder to develop. I've noticed recently that there's an increasing number of months allocated to creating more constructive habits. We've got things like Stoptober, Dry January, and No Nut November, all of which gather people together and promote the discipline to abstain from various destructive activities, like drinking, drugs, and porn. I personally think these kind of things are great. More importantly, they imply that more and more people are trying to build the discipline to change the pattern of their lives. However, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that habit change is much easier said than done. How many times have you made a plan, committed to a goal, or promised yourself to change, only to stop after a few days or weeks, give in to your impulses, and return to your old self? This happens a lot. Discipline, and I'll be repeating this a lot intentionally, is your ability to overcome your short-term desire. And short-term desire is the death of lasting habit change. So it follows that to change habits, we need to develop discipline. The Stoics were advocates of self-mastery. They promoted self-examination, self-control, personal responsibility, and objectivity, important ingredients in understanding where we need to change and then going about changing it. Stoicism teaches us that without discipline, we are destined to float through life as a passenger. They use the analogy of a dog tied to a cart. We go where the cart goes. However, with discipline, we are able to plot our own course. You become the captain standing at the helm of your ship. You develop the ability to choose your direction and leverage what's within your control to get there. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "He is a sorry pilot who lets the waves wring his rudder from his grasp, who leaves the sails to fly loose and abandons the ship to the storm. But he who boldly grasps the helm and clings to it until the sea closes over him deserves praise, even though he be shipwrecked." So if it's not clear already, why build self-discipline? Whatever goal we have, whether it's losing that extra weight, building our dream business, or becoming an incredible musician, we need to put in the work. And to put in the work, we need to be able to overcome our impulses. That's discipline. Again, the ability to act despite the temptation not to. This doesn't mean that you won't feel the desire to slack off. That whisper will likely always be there. It just means that you develop the ability to resist that feeling, to turn the volume down on it. The more you act in spite of your impulses, the better you are able to do so. In this way, discipline develops much like a muscle. Given that achievement, habit building, and goal reaching requires us to show up and work, discipline is one of the most important life skills required to be successful, whatever success might mean to you. Again, it's like a muscle. Start too hard and you won't be able to be consistent, but start small and increase the load over time, and before long you'll look back and see how far you've come. Often in our life there comes a point down the road where we look at where we're going and the path we're walking, and there may well be times where we're not happy with how it's going. We're not achieving what we want to achieve, we're not getting closer to the things in life we value, and the targets we've set for ourselves during those personal little conversations we have internally. These moments of reflection give us two choices. We continue to do what we've been doing, staying on our phones too late and sacrificing sleep, eating poorly and sacrificing our health, pressing next on Netflix instead of training for that 10K, or jumping into another Warzone queue instead of working on that paper. Or we work on discipline. We find the smallest positive step to go from 0 to 1. We make our bed every morning. We set an alarm and be strict when we wake up. We go for a jog before breakfast and buy a calendar to mark off the days in which we completed the task. We write 500 words before bed, meditate before going to sleep, or any other thing to start down the new road, forking from the one that's led you to question what you're doing. And we start small. Do that one thing until it becomes a habit, not a choice. Then add something new and repeat. After a year, you'll be surprised what changes can be made. After 5 years, you might have turned that 10K into a marathon. You might have turned those 500 words into a book. You may have started that business. But what you do know is that walking the same road that made you reflect and think, that road will probably keep you where you are. And in a year or so, or 5 years, you'll have those same reflective thoughts. The mind itself likes to conserve energy. Doing the same things that keep you fed, safe and warm are low energy if they've become a pattern. It doesn't require anything new, and that pattern will keep you alive and safe. The mind wants to be here. It wants to be comfortable. Trying to change its course will require energy, and as a result it will meet with resistance. Resistance will keep you under the warm covers in the winter. It will sit you down on the sofa and tell you to relax. It will generate stories and narratives that will make you believe that you deserve that chocolate bar. You deserve that comfort and that lie-in. It will tell you that you'll work hard tomorrow and you can relax today, but tomorrow comes and it says the same thing. The difference between discipline and motivation. Motivation is a great fuel to get stuff done, but it's inconsistent. It comes and goes. So if you rely solely on motivation to get things done, it's easy to fall back into old habits or procrastinate. Discipline is different. Discipline, when it's developed, is consistent. Discipline takes up the slack when motivation doesn't show up. It keeps us moving forward towards our target even when our body or mind doesn't want to. When it wants to stay warm, it wants to stay cuddled up on the sofa, eating Doritos and watching movies. Don't get me wrong, I'm an advocate of having lazy days every now and then to recharge. But I think it's important for this to be a choice, not a crutch. When we rely on motivation, our performance comes and goes, and we risk falling back into old habits. When we build discipline, our performance remains steady and consistent. As Jocko Willink says, discipline equals freedom. Why does it seem to be getting more and more difficult to build self-discipline? Well, discipline isn't easy in the first place. It's an uphill hike, and the hill doesn't have a summit. Not only that, but if you stop climbing, you won't stay where you are. You'll start to slide back down. I personally think that discipline is getting harder to cultivate. And the simple answer for why that's the case is that life is getting easier. An easier life creates two conditions that make discipline difficult to cultivate. The first is temptation. We're surrounded by more and more sources of temptation and distraction that make it increasingly difficult to overcome our impulses. Things like our phones, TV, social media, video games, ironically YouTube, are all competing for our attention, and many of them are designed specifically to draw us in and keep us hooked. This increasing noise makes it more difficult for us to overcome our desires not to work. Even so, this is not an excuse. It is still our responsibility to learn how to manage it. The second point is the lack of resistance. An easier life also gives us less opportunity to practice discipline. And discipline will atrophy like a muscle if it's not used. And in our world today, it's easier to get by without having to use it. Amazon offers next-day delivery. Netflix lets us watch what we want when we want to. We no longer have to wait a week to watch the next episode of something. Facebook and Instagram give us little dopamine hits whenever we need them. And for most of us in the Western world, we have things like Deliveroo where food can be delivered in about 30 to 60 minutes. And the list goes on. This instant gratification is slowly removing opportunities for us to practice discipline and patience. As a result, we're becoming impatient, entitled, expectant, and our attention span is reducing. Unfortunately for us, the world is removing sources of resistance, the same resistance that's needed for discipline to grow. So instead, we have to make our own, which is easier said than done. And it also seems a bit crazy. Why would we volunteer to make our lives more difficult if they can be easier? In reality, we don't need that much to survive. However, the body craves comfort, it craves satisfaction, it craves instant gratification, and it craves more. And as we've said, discipline is the ability to overcome these feelings. Regarding your mind's desire to want as much comfort as possible, to quote Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. Many people believe, including me, that excessive comfort hinders you. Your body will crave it, and it will draw you in like warmth draws people to a fire. A baseline level of comfort is absolutely fine. It's probably necessary for a happy life. However, too much will shrink your comfort zone and will dissolve your discipline. Too much comfort softens us. Like a muscle that isn't used, we weaken. And resistance is uncomfortable, but resistance is a catalyst for growth. As we overcome it, it gives us a feeling of development, fulfillment, and achievement. It shows us the boundaries of our ability and allows us to surpass them. The psychological impact of knowing that you can do something is profound compared to only thinking that you can do something but not knowing. And you can only find this boundary by pushing yourself through resistance. No one finds their limits sat on a sofa. So in a world that's removing sources of resistance, what can we do? Simply put, we just make our own. Some examples of this is regular exercise, events like 10Ks, 5Ks, charity runs, mud runs, obstacle runs, martial arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and boxing, learning a new hobby that you're interested in, building something, whether that's as small as a table in your shed or as big as a house, waking up early, having cold showers, continuing your education like your degree, accreditation or PhD, starting a passion project or side business. Some of these things do require money, but some of them are also free. So how do we build discipline? I've said before that discipline is like a gym. We need resistance to grow, and that growth will depend on the resistance we apply. If we're new to the gym, we don't go balls to the walls and try and deadlift 300 kilograms. We start small with light weights. The same is true for discipline. We start small, we make our bed, we do the laundry, we tidy a room, we write a page, we read a page. We don't eat that chocolate bar, we walk at lunch, we put down our phone, we don't open that incognito tab, we go to bed early, wake up early, have a cold shower, or any other number of things that we can use to add a bit of resistance to overcome. Basically, anytime we hear that little voice calling us to resist an action, or validate our decision not to do something, this is an opportunity to develop resistance. And this is the resistance needed to grow. Regarding that voice, once we're aware of it, we can notice it. When we notice it, we can catch it. When we catch it, we can use it as a tool for growth. To end, we will always have the pull of short-term desire, trying to drag us away from the long-term things we want. However, we can develop the ability to more easily say no to that pull. This is discipline, and it's our responsibility. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius was an emperor of Rome, and he still had the same struggle with discipline as you and I. We covered the very start of this quote earlier in the video, but the longer version he wrote was, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm? But it's nicer here. So you were born to feel nice, instead of doing things and experiencing them. Don't you see the plants, the birds, the ants and spiders and bees going about their individual tasks, putting the world in order as best they can? And you're not willing to do your job as a human being. Why aren't you running to do what your nature demands? But we have to sleep sometime. Agreed, but nature set a limit on that, as it did on eating and drinking, and you're over the limit. You've had more than enough of that, but not of working. There you're still below your quota. You don't love yourself enough, or you love your nature too, and what it demands of you. People who love what they do wear themselves down doing it. They even forget to wash or eat. Do you have less respect for your own nature than the engraver does for engraving, the dancer for dancing, the miser for money, or the social climber for status? When they're really possessed by what they do, they'd rather stop eating and sleeping than give up practicing their arts.